Okay, so good morning, everybody. My task this morning is quite simple. Firstly, to be very impressed that you are here at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. When we started talking about organizing the conference and we had a look at what we were going to squeeze into one day, it became very apparent that we were going to have to bring Joburg time and energy to Cape Town. So we really appreciate you being here. We have a very packed program, but hopefully an interesting one. We do also have people who will come in and out. So the Neville Alexander Auditorium is going to be buzzing for the day until 7. We hope you stay with us. For those who can't, we do welcome you back when you're allowed to return from your busy schedules. So my welcome is on behalf of the UCT School of Education, which is housed in the Neville Alexander building. Also, CERT at UJ, the Centre for Education Rights and Transformation, and in particular the SACHI Chair in Community, Adult and Worker Education, and then DVV Southern Africa, who very quickly came together to make sure that we could put together this platform, this space for all of us to celebrate and think and reflect on Neville's work and actually some of the work that others are also doing. So we all know that this year has been tough on so many fronts. So we hope that today's reflection, thinking, engagement will provide energy and some solve because of what all of you have had to witness and hopefully be part of resisting, and we'll talk more about that during the day. Just to say, this building, the Neville Alexander building, has come to house not only the School of Education, but through our seminar series and other engagements, in fact, also organizing meetings, organizing engagements beyond simply the School of Education. This place has, not only in the form of its auditorium, but in the form of its meeting and teaching rooms, really been the place where people have gathered to think critically and also to think about the role of the university in relation to what's going on in society. So in that way, we feel very at home and proud that this building is named the Neville Alexander Building. So very quickly, and I don't know why alliteration is happening more and more when I think very quickly about how to say something. So there's a number of R's here. We're going to remember today, but I'm going to speak very briefly about relationships, revisiting, and reflecting. So in terms of relationships, this conference and platform has allowed a moment every year since Neville's passing to bring together comrades, colleagues, and friends, all of you, some of whom have sat in this room before who are no longer with us. So if we look at the program, some of the remembering will start with remembering comrades who are no longer with us. But we're also revisiting work that Neville contributed to through the projects he was involved in and some of the revolutionary action. You'll see the SACID archiving project, but also in the publication section, reflections on LACOM, one of SACID's projects, a PhD thesis written around the Yuchi Chen Club, and more. So we'll be revisiting some of the work that he was part of, as well as revolutionary action. And then the reflecting part, we are really continuing to return to his reflections, his ideas, and focus from language to the national question to critical global issues. So in a way, the program really has tried to make space for continuing the relationships, old and new, revisiting the work, revisiting both the project work, the NGO work, but also the revolutionary reading clubs and forms of resistance, and then also thinking about Neville's ideas for the now, for the purpose of trying to figure out and plot a way forward in this very difficult world we're living in. Housekeeping, last part. Toilets, the one down here unfortunately is broken. One floor up, if you get out of the lift, you turn right. If you walk up the stairs, you turn left. You'll find the toilets down the passage. They are mirrored another floor up. So if you go 1 or 2 floors up, you'll find the toilets. Tea will be outside today. Lunch will be upstairs, one floor up, and you walk past the toilets. It's in Studio 2, so that's where we're sitting and eating together. Then on that floor, if you carry on down, on the left and right, you will walk through an exhibition called Letters to Palestinian Children. This came out of a seminar that we hosted. If you have a phone, you can use the QR codes to see the videos attached to each artwork. So if you have a bit of time, please go and look at that exhibition. Then in the entrance hall, all of you would have had to walk past the Surplus bookstore. If you didn't manage to buy some books, Surplus Radical bookstore will stay upstairs for the day. And also one of the projects that Andre, who holds that bookstore together, was talking about was trying to animate and get publishers to republish Neville's books that are all out of print. So that is something I think we can all get behind. So look out for something around that. And now I will hand over to Prof. Salim Vali, who will extend the welcome and introduction. Tseho, can you come and just...
Since when have I become a prof, comrade? I bring it down. I just click on it to go down. Amandla. Lolo, good morning. Thank you for coming to the 12th. Okay. Thanks for attending the 12th Neville Alexander Conference, and thanks also to the comrades in Cape Town for pulling this together and allowing us to use this beautiful auditorium. I'm just going to really run through the various conferences we've had over the past 12 years. And the idea is really to reflect on Neville's writings, his praxis, but also link that to topical issues and struggles. Thank you. Every year. So, for instance, the first year, we had people like Ambit Kathrada with Neville on the island. We had people in various mass organizations involved in struggle with Neville to reflect. The main conference, really, commemoration, was in Belgravia, but we had one in Johannesburg as well. And then, you know, the areas like reading clubs, childhood development, adult education, lots of popular booklets, and this was a particular launch of the booklets. There are a number of people here who worked on these booklets, people who were involved with Neville Colley, Nadima, Brian, Ntombi, many others, on reading groups in various townships at a time when it wasn't really an issue, and Neville really struggled without resources to make this a reality, and the commitment of comrades in different parts of the country. This is the one we had in 2014. I'm just going to skim through them. I'm not going to go into too much detail. The one in 2014, and this is really interesting. In 2015, we had quite a massive conference. We had representatives from almost every university, not representing the students, but people. Not just students, but staff and unionists, workers, and really good discussions. Of course, we were accused by some university managements of being behind the 2016 violence, is what they talked about, what they mentioned. We had some, we were invited to have tea with the top management to politely talk about the issues. And of course, I wanted to know where they got this notion and whether we had special workshops on how to make the most efficient Molotov cocktail. And of course, it became a harangue from us against them instead of a polite. We didn't hear from them ever again. This was in 2017. I have to say that we had a lot of debate about these two big men, and Antonio Dada just small there. And this is not the final poster, but part of this interaction, including the design of posters, is a political act. And we had many, many such comradely discussions, but it was also brilliant because we linked it to the pedagogy of the oppressed, and we had a number of discussions. I know Leanne and others led a discussion of young women educators, and they reflected on their issues, struggles, and education, and the influence of Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed. I mean, one of the people who objected to the poster was none other than my daughter. And she just took out a piece of cardboard and she says, "This is the kind of poster you need." So this was another poster that we circulated for that particular conference. So over the years, we've discussed many issues. In 2019, and there have been constants like language in education. But this particular year, we had lots of input and passionate discussions around climate catastrophe, xenophobia, what some universities call, or individuals, taking the cue from the Davos lot, the fourth industrial revolution. Of course, I don't think we've surpassed the second one, dear, in this country. But also issues like gender-based violence. This was really fascinating. In 2021, we had Robin D.G. Kelly, Barbara Ramsby, and the whole issue of racial capitalism. And we linked up with others in the country, globally, as well as people like Andile Zulu, Mosa Padi, Trevor Ngwane, Enver Motala, Terry Magot. And because it was COVID, it was online, and we had 800 people joining this particular online conference. This was in Cape Town here in this auditorium, the 10th anniversary. For some reason, my dear friend Clarence Ford in Cape Talk thinks every conference after the 10th anniversary is still the 10th anniversary, if you heard the interview with him. But he's very, very supportive of the work we do. And yes, in some of these conferences, so in this particular conference, Comrade Batty was here. I have a few photographs at the end. Frank van der Haas was also here. They with us in spirit, of course. We will always continue remembering them. But throughout the years, we've lost people, too many, whether it was Madni Halim, James Marsh, I can go on. The list is very long, but we will be speaking to that after this particular session. back in Joburg, and you know, we've had really uplifting poetry and music in many of these sessions. This was the launch of this book, which, you know, the publishers tell me is doing really well globally. This is just details of that, and here we come to today, and just you can try and see if you recognize yourself there. Some familiar faces, absent ones as well. It's Virginia and Terry. There's Tumi at the back with a lovely smile. There's Vusi on the left. There's Nadira behind, and Alex. And of course, Leanne here is saying, she looks very amused. I look very fed up in the background. Yeah, this was I think the one with in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. Goli, Tombi, trying to get me to be a bit more animated. Okay, there's some of the group discussions we've had. There's Madni with his daughter Alia. I've Aziz Chowdhury, who sadly, tragically left us. Farida, who's just completed her PhD. And by the way, over the years, it's been really heartwarming to see a number of students complete their PhDs. We're waiting for Nadima here to do so, but we have Tandi, who wrote a brilliant thesis. Asher has just completed. A number of people I can't immediately recall now, but increasingly more and more. And they play and continue playing a particular role at these academic spaces. Ashley Fasahi, I understand, has just completed as well. We've also had lots of talented people come, besides musicians and actors and poets, but also caricaturists. And this is particular, I forget his name. Sorry? Samesh. He is absolutely brilliant with his, if you can see there, national question, One Azania, One Nation, LGBTI, Makoma, Lekalakala, climate change. I'm sure that is Rasigan with a beard. And of course, this is the one we had 2 years ago with Comrade Batty, Marcus, Sophie, Eugene, Crane, Asher, and Leanne. Okay, I think I'll stop there. Thanks, Leanne. Thank you.
Speakers for the next session forward.
Should I not share or should I try to leave them to?
Okay, so everyone be seen.
Last one, no.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Right. Good morning, comrades, friends, and all those who are online as well. Salim and Leanne, thank you very much for giving us such a good introduction to show the continuity of, in a way, the legacy of Neville and how Neville bring us all together in various ways. And of course, Neville never really did it alone. There were many who walked that journey with them. And we are very honored to have many of them here today. So our task here is to make sure that we have that ongoing struggle of memory against forgetting. We mustn't forget. And so as Salim and Leanne indicated in this very room, 2 years ago, certainly, we had Frankie van der Horst and we had Elizabeth van der Hayden with us, and they are not with us today. So we will very briefly, between 7 minutes for each speaker, remember them, their impact on the struggle for a better world, really, but also what do we learn from that? And what do we take from that? What do we distill out from that and take forward? Because I think we are here to find solutions to the vexing and sometimes what seem to be almost paralyzing problems of our time. So we are looking for solutions that can inspire us, that can unite us, that can give us hope, that we can build that more equal and that more informed and more truthful world. So from amongst the group that was sentenced with Neville, I was reminded by Betty's family that there are 3 members left. And they are Marcus Solomon, who are sitting there with us here, Lionel Davis, who very much wanted to be here today, but cannot be, and many of you will know him as the artist, who really through his work taught us the great importance of art in struggle and the changes that it can wrought. And so Lionel sends his solidarity greetings. He cannot be with us today. And the third person is Joyce van der Hayden, Betty van der Hayden's sister, who is in London. But online today we have Betty's family members, and I very much want to recognize Jenny, Betty's sister, who are here with us today. Youngest sister, thank you, Jenny, for joining us. She ended up at the main building, the main campus, and walked down all the way from there this morning. Thank you, Jenny, for being here. So, comrades, I very much, Comrade Marcus is going to speak on Betty, and then Eugene on Frankie van der Horst. So thank you, Comrade Marcus.
Stand
or sit?
No, I'll stand, yeah. Comrades, friends, and Lizzie's family, Jenny was here, and I know Tina and some of the others in London and England are online, or I think that's the word. But I also want to thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of the Remembering program. 7 minutes is a very short time in where I come from in the rural areas. Jy moet gou praat en vinnig praat. I met Jenny, Lizzie, and we used to call her Lizzie, in 1959, 65 years ago. I joined this Cape Peninsula Students' Union then, and Lizzie was part of many people have all gone. A few of them are remaining, people like Fikle Bam, Archie Mafeji, Nina Fredericks, and many others, Carl Brecker, and of course Audrey, and Miriam Ajam, etc. I think it's quite important to capture the context. Lizzie grew up in Athlone, Bromley Road. If Jenny Rech? Number 3 Bromley Road. And very soon I got to know all members of the family. And I think this is very important because we've written our families out of history that lay the basis for whom we are or who we are. And of course, within a few years, that CPSU context rose to great prominence through what we then did. But before I go there, there's also the national context and the international context. The CPSU didn't just emerge out of nothing because of Neville or Fikile or Marcus, whatever. Internationally, we just we're entering and just come out of a very exciting period international, the liberation struggles, struggle for independence, etc., etc. But most importantly, I think, there was a global movement around internationalism. And I think what struck us almost immediately was that we should all strive to be citizens of the world. And I think that's very important. And the second thing is movement building. In Xhosa, there's an expression there, umuntu, kamuntu, kabantu. Correct? You are a human being because of other human beings. Sometimes we miss that when we chat. We speak about the Communist Manifesto, the Freedom Charter, but the basic things we miss. And fortunately for us, we were able, because we through our contacts and our movement building program, it was emphasized. You build movements not with the party. Yes, the party comes in, but you build a movement to build communities. That there's a basis of a set of values, respect, etc. Let me pass on to say that was the context. And we were all part of an organization called the Unity Movement. But within that section, by then already the Unity Movement had split, or in the process of splitting. We were part of what became then the Tabata faction, or whatever. And I'm sorry, sometimes we became part of Abdusa. And I had already been invited. Those days, the people referred to SOY as being the youth wing of the Unity Movement. But you couldn't join the Unity. You were invited. So I was invited, and a few of us to become part of the SOYA. But then, in that discussion, nationally, there was a rising tide of also be wanting to become part of the freedom struggle, sweeping the continents. For example, in 1959, when I joined the CPSU, Cuba, Castro and his, what somebody calls it, is his group of mortal gang of revolutionaries overthrew the Batista government. Then, of course, Ghana became independent in 1958, etc., etc. So there's also a struggle around how do we begin to accelerate the struggle for freedom. Of course, the whole thing of armed struggle, guerrilla movements, etc. In South Africa, MK had been started, APLA, etc., the African resistance movement, ARM, and we wanted to be part of that. So the whole idea of where do we start? Let's start a UTTN club, a study of the guerrilla war. We formed the National Liberation Front. And of course, we uncovered, we went to prison, we were detained, and we went to prison for 10 number of us, 11. But many others had to flee the country, were not charged, etc. That period was quite important. Neville was quiz number 1, Don Davis number 2, I was number 3, and number 4 was Lizzie. And next to Lizzie was Fikile Bam, and so on. And for purpose of time saving, I won't mention all that. Now that is quite important. Here's me, there's of course me, Lizzie, and Fikile. So for 7 months, those 11 people spent time together, and that was quite important. And of course, afterwards we know that Fix and Lizzie had a partnership, and they produced the YCC baby Tina. And Tina, I hope you're online in London. We had what we call the UTChan baby Tina. But that came afterwards. Now, I would like to, because of time, much of this is history in the history books. I think Ash has written a wonderful story of the National Liberation Front UTChan Club. The point I would like us to remember, Lizzie organized 3 of her siblings, a brother and 2 sisters. And they were all, Leslie just got married to Ursula February, Basil February's elder sister. When Les was detained and so on, eventually arrested and sent to prison, that family was hard hit. 3 brothers, 1 brother, 2 sisters, a sister-in-law, and of course a little baby. I think Karen, I hope Karen, you are online. We still remember you. So, and for the rest of the time, those 4 women were written out of history. And for a long time, Lizzie was very angry. Not because she didn't get the material support. What she was really angry about was that they were being discriminated against by the patriarchal society. And I don't even want to go to the organizations responsible and the state responsible for that. And I think it's very important for us. I just finished reading the history of the women of the Irish women who participated, were involved in Easter 1916. The history has only been written now, 100 years later. So the lesson for us is, what are we doing about the patriarchal society? For the last 30 years, Lizzie and her colleagues and those women, they spent 5 years, 7 years, 10 years in 4 different prisons. And the island became a male story. All the great men on the island, Even when they came out, they were released somewhere and they were sent home, etc., etc. Those men were released in the blaze of glory. And I want to say that very loud, comrades. You know, after banning expired and we had very little contact, of course, we all got involved in our own survival programs and other activities. But I think that's very important. Later on, when we talk about the national question, this whole thing about all sorts of things, but the issue of women is looming large in our society. And what Lizzie is, she was very strong woman, very strong. But she had a wonderful life. She could dance, sy kon lekker gesels het en lekker geskinder het. And great teacher, great activist, strong. But where did she get the strength from? Her ma. You know, don't look for it in books. She got it from her mother. And I think we must come back to this. Our life didn't start. How much time do we have? Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Who sustain them? Their mothers and their families. Not the liberation movement. And I'm not saying that in a disrespectful manner, please. Because we really want to further emphasize this point, that sustenance doesn't come from the organizations we belong to. It comes from the movements we belong to, but also our communities. That's why it's quite important And Lizzie was able to say, because she had a spiritual, ideological, and all other influences in her life. But the real material came from her family, and of course some of her family were quite angry. I don't want to speak out of context, but and quite rightly so, because they were left alone. Yeah, the last point I want to make is that the lesson that I think we should take from their life is that, and there are many lessons, but the one thing is we cannot allow women to be left, even when they're involved, they are not recognized. But more importantly, the patriarchal value system that is responsible for that sort of ignoring women. And Lizzie was ignored, by the way, by this new South Africa. And I think we need to, not only to Lizzie, but all the other women. In fact, all the other women. We need to build a grassroots mass movement of women, including within the context of a grassroots solidarity movement in this country. Thank you very much. Mandla.
Thank you very much, Comrade Marcus. And of course, I'm sure each and every one of us here would like to add that beautiful, beautiful message you gave us from the inside. Thank you very much, Comrade Marcus. And we would have loved to have given you a lot of time.
Thank you. No.
So Eugene will now speak on Frankie van der Horst, and then we'll come to Azim.
Thank you and greetings, comrades. And I'm grateful for Marcus for taking a bit of my time so I can speak a bit more briefly. But I was wondering what to say about Frankie in a few minutes. But he's pointed me in the right direction. I first met Frank when I was at high school, Standard 7 or 8, in 1962, when he came. I think it was his first teaching assignment. And anyone who met him that time or later would attest to his complete passion for teaching, passion for the politics of liberation. And he threw everything into it. You know, they made no distinction between teaching mathematics or environmental science or whatever his subject was, and speaking about the politics of the day. And so 62, and most of you can't imagine what the political landscape was in 62, of repression, post-Sharpeville, and so on. And, you know, everyone was dreaming of what to do about it. It was a time post-Cuban Revolution. Regis Debray, speaking about, you know, the theories of armed struggle and how to overthrow an oppressive regime. And Frank not only spoke about his subject, obviously, he found some time for that, but how the capitalist system is constructed, the role of the mining industry in exploitation, the pass laws, the migrant labor system, and so on, and the role of gold in the world economy. So that was Frank, but he also brought other enthusiasms, his love for the outdoor life, and engaged everyone in all of that, sport and so forth. So I don't want to go further down that path. The other thing, aspect, so he recruited me and others into Abdusa. He was a committed member, and you know, we can speak at length about what organizing and so on people into a political organization at the time meant and how it was done and so forth. But in the late 60s, when the various trials had taken place, including, of course, the trials of Neville. He knew Neville, of course, and Neville knew him, and the jailing of. It was Frank who organized and support for the families as best he could of the prisoners who were jailed, who came to visit Robben Island, and the Van der Heyden family in particular. He was there often to see what he could do and to help where he could. He did it unflinchingly and without any hint of sectarianism. It didn't matter if the families were families of ANC members or those who were politically closer to him. That was Frank. The other thing I just want to touch on, because I'm aware of time, is his passion for sport. Now, how he ended up going into sport, into SACOS and so forth, is another story. It's the story of the times, the time of repression and so forth. But he gave expression to his political convictions through a commitment to non-racial sport and opposing the integration of the continued integration of South Africa in international sport, along with Dennis Brutus and others, Eisenhower and so forth. And I'll just fast forward because of time to his later years, when he continued to try to engage in reviving what he saw was necessary to oppose the privatization and commercialization of sport, to the neglect of sport for the masses, access and opportunity for people from the working class schools and backgrounds to sport at the highest levels. And in contrast to the adoption of the idea that sport is an elitist thing, that you select the best athletes and give them special training and special facilities and so forth, to the neglect of sport for the masses as a right, as part of their education, as part of their inherent right to participate in society. So those ideas he carried through to the very last days of his life. Thank you.
Right.
I beat the chair to the...
We'll now ask Azim, who will speak on Ramesh Jaram and Aisha Faki. Thank you.
Actually, would have liked that sat down. Good morning, all. When Eugene speaks about 1962, meeting Frank in the classroom, when I speak about Aisha and I speak about Ramesh, it's kind of fast forward. Aisha was born in 1977. Ramesh was born in 1965. And we are today remembering them alongside greats like Frank and Elizabeth. I think it's important that we honor our friends, that we honor our colleagues through memory. Change happens really in what we do. And so when you speak, when my colleagues here speak about what has come before, how activism happens, the consequences and the challenges and how one goes about doing that in the everyday. We also forget sometimes that the work actually also happens in organizations, in institutions, in the classroom, amongst ourselves, with ourselves. And when colleagues pass, it's only when they pass that we realize what they bring to our lives and what they bring to what we do, education. So if I can just do two short inserts on Aisha Faiki and Ramesh Jerem. I speak today in relation to the two of them, not having known either of them for too long. Ramesh I've known most of my life, but most people we don't really know when we work with them. They work alongside us, and we, unlike colleagues that speak at length about the meetings that they had and all these things, when we work together, the strange thing is we don't really know. Aisha worked at UCT for just more than 1 year. I met her in 2019 when she first arrived here. And then in the heart of COVID, Aisha phoned me one day and said, Azim, I'm not continuing. I can't take this. So I'm resigning immediately. So I knew her only for 1 year. And so I speak about Aisha as a colleague in memory of her, having known her for but 1 year. Ramesh then joined the school development unit, but who falls under the School of Education, in April 2021. I'll get to that joke in a minute. He started on April Fool's Day, 1st of April, and he always said, I'm an April Fool's head. And I'll come back to that later on. But let me start with Aisha. Aisha, the fascinating thing is that Aisha was born in 1977. So when we think about time, she was 17 in 1994 when we finally moved away from formal apartheid and colonial rule. And in that short time from 1994 to when she left high school, and she was at Trafalgar High School, so she was part of that old cohort that still joined our schools and didn't move on to other schools. She came out of Trafalgar High School in 1994, and by 2004 had gotten a master's in BSOC in organizational psychology and economics at UCT. And in this organization, by that time, she had worked as a researcher, mostly in the health sciences, and then in working in communication and development, which she then took on and moved to Stellenbosch University and worked there from, I think, 2006 until 2014. By the time she left Stellenbosch, she was the director of the Development Office of Institutional Advancement at Stellenbosch University. So she used her work and her own activism to implant ideas about transformation at Stellenbosch University. She then moved on to the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. She was there for a few years, and then she came to UCT in the Schools Development Unit. She left UCT in 2020, went and joined Equal Education. With Equal Education, she was there for about 1 or 2 years, became a consultant in 2021, and passed away just 1 month ago at the age of 47. I think the key thing that we must remind ourselves about, if I asked Aisha would speak about the core skills in leadership, program management, monitoring and evaluation, organizational strategy, fundraising, stakeholder engagement in NGOs and in higher education. That's how she defined herself. But after 2019, what defined Aisha was her engagement with educational community activism and vocal engagement with systemic violence within education. She was passionate about examining the unconscious privileges that different members of society bring to spaces where bridges need to be built, and where understandings of lived experiences need to be deepened. That was Aisha. Her passing came as a huge loss, mainly because she brought a calmness to work. When she joined STU, the one thing that I spoke about when I spoke about Aisha, she brought calmness, she brought integrity, she brought quiet confidence, and she brought clarity. And when you have those attributes in a workplace, you are able to do things. Aisha then sit at platform at school, the school's development unit. And in April the 1st, 2021, Ramesh joined, Dr. Ramesh Cheram from, he came from Stellenbosch University, joined in 2021 and was here for 3.5 years. And 2 months ago, had a heart attack and passed away suddenly at the age of 59. The thing about Ramesh, by the way, he always spoke about himself as the April Fool's head. And that why he did that, he joked about everything. Ramesh, he brought humor to every single space that he could possibly bring, because he believed that brought humanity into the room. He said, if you take yourself too seriously, you're not going to bring about change. He was committed to serving the education sector, whether that be at UCT, Stellenbosch University, or within schools. He taught at Cathkin High School for 14 years before he joined the higher education sector. He brought seriousness of task and a lightness of spirit to all of his work. That's something very, very rare. His key mantras: sincerity, honesty, compassion, thoughtfulness, hard graft. Real progressiveness comes through empathy and kindness. When I worked with Ramesh, the one thing that I took away out of every meeting is kindness, belief in each other, and a belief that we loved each other. But he said all of those were the foundations for critical thought. He said, we always say that critical thought comes first and then we have the attributes. He said you have to build critical thought on kindness and compassion. He embodied what it meant to be as an educator in South Africa. He fostered inclusive learning spaces and had a unique quality that connected people from all walks of life. He knew everybody's name, he knew everybody's date of birth. He knew when their birthdays were, he knew when their families had passed. Ramesh lived in the building as a human being. He believed in the potential of every person and the need to support and nurture his fellow comrades in the pathways that they chose. And that's how he dealt with all his colleagues. He was a truly empathetic, authentic human being, someone that acknowledged his mistakes, but more importantly, was willing to make mistakes. He was thoughtful, warm, engaging, and took nothing lightly. I say all these things because I worked with Ramesh for 3.5 years, and boy, did I love that man. I learned so much from him, and when he passed just 2 months ago, it hit me really, really hard. He was a mathematics and physics teacher that engaged education in all of his spirit and all of his heart. So let me end with this. Ramesh was brilliant as an educator, as a teacher, facilitator, and as a leader of an educational space. He was a devoted friend to all of us at School of Education and at the school's development unit. His energy was infectious. His gregariousness was unmatched. His joyfulness was unhinged. And his laughter was contagious. He loved music, he loved food, he loved jazz. And it characterized a comrade that lived life with humility, with belief, meaning, and deep reflection.
Thank you very much, Azim, for speaking so passionately of people who've been an integral part of the work here and the work that makes it possible for us to gather here. So thank you very, very much. It is sad to know that people who have so much to give pass on so young. And I'm wondering how we prevent those kinds of things. So we will need to reflect a lot on that. So thank you very, very much. There is a fifth person on display. It's Landy Braun. And we may ask, why would we have a professor from Brown University in the US, a daughter of the US, speak about her at a Neville Alexander memorial meeting or conference? And I think it's really got to do with that internationalism, the importance of internationalism that Marcus spoke about. And she did an enormous amount of work in Africa, in South Africa. And I'm sure that she and Neville had many, many discussions on the issue of race and racism, because that was sort of the core of her work. So Landy, just a brief background, was a professor of pathology, of laboratory medicine and Afrikaner studies at Brown Universities for about 35 years. The overarching goal of her practical and research work was really to analyze the historical role of science in the production of racial hierarchies. And specifically, her research takes an interdisciplinary approach to analyze the various dimensions of structures of racism and inequalities and how those are naturalized, and the naturalization of human difference in medicine and in public health, because, you know, she was a pathologist. So the three projects that she sort of spent the bulk of her life on is really the history of race and racism embedded in theories and mathematic formulas assessing lung function and kidney function. 2, the social, political, and scientific production of invisibility about work-related diseases such as asbestos or silicosis in the mines of South Africa. And 3, the contemporary debate over race, genomics, and health inequality, which is, of course, huge in the US and here, as it impacts explanatory frameworks and the medical pedagogy. She also wrote a book, an extremely well-researched book called Breathing Race into the Machine. It's essentially showing us how lung function test, which I'm sure many of you would have had, you know, the spirometry, when we go and see what is our lung capacity, and certainly in my work, it's something that we use every day. How the lung function tests are racialized, saying that if I have to use the Verwoerdian classifications, well, they may say Caucasian, then your lung function test capacity is bigger. And if you are not of Caucasian origin, then your lung function capacity are lower, so they race adjust. And it's there. Every lung function machine in the world has it, and yet we don't know. And it's the basis of color. So you see the importance of internationalism, how a daughter of America helped us here through lectures at various universities in South Africa, put a bright spotlight on issues of race in science and how science, then that interpretation, perpetuates racial classifications that is based on skin color. And, you know, it's just so unbelievable at times, and yet it is there. So Landy very sadly passed away on the 9th of August this year. She went out walking in her area in Rhode Island and was knocked down by a car, so she passed on. And so there's much work that she has done. She has helped enormously with the asbestos work. I had the opportunity to work alongside her in much of the asbestos work in the villages, in the Kuruman Blue Asbestos Belt, where the severe asbestos cancers are still raging, the invisible epidemics. and how one can find ways to support communities who continue to be exposed through environmental contamination of the mines, organize themselves to protect their own health and the health of the children. So their legacy will continue. And we are raising the issue of Landi's work here today. She was an extremely accomplished academic, but also a very humble human being who engage with villagers in participatory research through their drawings to see what are solutions and so on and so forth, together with her husband and one of her daughters. And she brought students from American universities and paired them up with students in South African universities in order to work within communities and raise the necessary resources to make it possible for the South African students to join the American students during their summer time that they were working here. So I want to leave you with this in the hope that maybe we can take up some of the things that they have already achieved, how at Brown and other universities they have set up centers where students can study the issues of race and racism, but where the supervision is of such a nature that there is not misinterpretation of what race is all about, because it's a complex issue. It's not just racism, it's also the race correction that is subtly everywhere. So thank you very much, comrades. Maybe just lastly, I wanted to say just one thing, because Jenny is here, and I was reminded by an old friend that Jenny said that Frankie drove her and her mother to the prison that Betty was. Where was it, Jenny? All around, Frankie did that. So I just want to say, and this is what Eugene was referring to, the quiet, just doing it. That family needed to be driven all the way there with his old Toyota. and that is what he did. Lastly, Karen Press, who also knew Landi, and of course the other comrades we spoke about today, say it's been a season of loss, a season of loss. And Karen said that in her gentle, poetic way. And I just want to leave you with that. Thank you, comrades.
Thanks, everyone. Just an update. We are not doing too badly. Somehow the calmness that I'm feeling at the end of the year is holding us together. So we're only half an hour behind time, but I do want to ask, one of our speakers does have to get onto a plane. And if we leave the program as is, it's going to just raise stress levels. So what we're going to do, thank you to the comrades from the SACED archival project website launch. They've agreed that we can swap around. So we're going to have the language panel first. It doesn't interfere with your tea break, don't worry. But we're going to move. So can I please invite Brian Ramadiro, and we're just going to swap over. If you need a loo break, now will be the time, but we're going to start in 3 minutes once the PowerPoints are up. And can we invite those on the language panel to please step forward? So basically what we're looking at is we are half an hour ahead of time. Let's keep that spirit. It will take you at least 2.5 minutes to get to the bathroom. So you've got about 45 seconds to get back.
Okay, comrades, let's get started. Good morning, comrades. Okay, my name is Brian Ramadiro. I'm going to be chairing this session. Okay. Okay, Enver, we're getting started. Okay, comrades, thank you so much. This session is going to be split into 3 parts. So in the first part, we're going to get a presentation from Dr. Naledi Mbode, who I'm going to introduce in a second. And then the second part, we're going to have a short video, about 25 minutes. And this video is actually a follow-up to Sink or Swim. And many people have seen that video before. And that video is quite an important video that was shot, I think, in the early 90s. So it kind of depicts the problem with language in education. But this second video is an update. So it kind of talks more to solutions, what you can do to use children's languages to support their learning. So that will be the second part. So we'll take the talk by Naledi and then directly go into the video. And then the last part, we're going to have a small panel of about 4 people. They're going to engage with what Naledi has said, but also talk to the video very briefly. And then we'll open it up for a discussion. So, and we're hoping to do all of this in about an hour and a half. Welcome, Robin. Okay, thank you very much. So very briefly, Dr. Naledi Mbode is the Deputy Director General for Transformation Programs in the Department of Basic Education in Pretoria. She's actually very well known to many people here. Before that, she was the head of Department of Education in the Eastern Cape province. And before that, she was the director of the language unit in that province. Before that, she was in the Western Cape Department of Education here. And before that, she was at this university at Prisa with Neville Alexander. She worked for many years in their science and maths unit. So that's briefly her history. She's going to speak to us for about half an hour. Naledi, take it off.
Not sure which mic to use. This one or that one. Molweni bethu. More. Goeiemôre. Matla. Thank you, Brian. I really want to extend my appreciation for being invited to be part of Neville's lecture. Key and important to being part of the group that worked with Neville at Prisa. Neville and I had many fights. He was very stubborn, so am I. But I think I learned the most. I was appointed by mistake, purely, because at the time of my appointment, I didn't think that we could do this. But Neville, being Neville, said, we don't want Black people who drive around in Mercedes-Benzes, who don't know that, like a monkey does not know that when you put bananas and money, they go for the bananas, not realizing that you can buy more bananas with the money. That's how acerbic and acidic Neville was, because he was terribly scared, of the post-1994 period, and was terrified that all of us would not understand why the struggle continued. So every time, as a government official, I get frustrated. I always blame him, because it was him who pushed me out of Prisa to go to the Eastern Cape and start the work that we have done. And every time they come after me, I always say it is Neville's fault. I would be in my office, being an academic, like most people, and not worry too much about what happens in government. But he said to me, we can't all be here. Some of us must be out there. And today I look at his sister and I say, Amandla. It hasn't been an easy journey, but I think that his spirit will live on because we will continue to be part of the work that must actually happen. While some of us have a responsibility to sit and write up the work that must happen, some of us must actually do that work. So in complementing each other and not competing in this blame game that usually happens, by people sometimes who are not in classrooms or who are not out there, I become sad that it's not helping anyone. It's just posturing that this one thinks better than the other, and this one is sloppy, and this one, is perfect, and all of that. We don't have time, colleagues. There's a lot of work to be done because, like colleagues were saying earlier on here, that we run out of time. We don't know how much time we have. So it's important that we do what we are doing today and begin to share our work. It might be sloppy, but it is work to be done. The education department, we will see in my title slide that we are speaking now about epistemic access for all children in South Africa to the curriculum, because the education system has been designed around two groups in South Africa. And we see when we do the analysis of results that it is these two groups that are doing well, whether it's literacy, whether it's numeracy, whether it's science. You are bound to have a system that advantages these two groups. And I want everyone in this room to be aware that Neville's ideas at the time, he was way ahead of his time. And as you sit and go through the assessment data, then you realize, oh my God, if he was alive, he would have said, I told you so. I was just a science teacher when I met this man, and Professor Rochford, Kevin, our science lecturer, I invited Neville because I was a student teacher, already teaching and doing further education. This man was invited to present this lecture. Those of us who did science, we always think that there's something wonderful about science, and you are sort of you are socialized to believe that you are cleverer than anybody else because you know something that is magic. And Neville just split all of us who was a slicer in that class to realize that actually there was nothing important about us. In doing the analysis of the system over 30 years and seeing, and you'll see with those greens, that this is some of the areas of progress in the system, and the three reds that remain, that are that stick out as a sore, like a sore thumb. Number one are the inherited inequalities; they still remain. And number two is the budget constraints combined with the growth in learner numbers. The more children there are now in the system, the more we realize that actually we have problems of access. Now that we have access to the classroom door, there are more problems and challenges with that. It's an important challenge. And the third one is the continuing poverty at home. We can't do much about the poverty at home for now, but we at least try to provide children with the school nutrition. But we see that the cycle of poverty that it is at home is a direct result of what happens with the kind of education system that we are driving right now. And this is why it is important that we mention what we are trying to address with the program called, the strategy called the Mother Tongue-Based Bilingual Education Program. Neville would say, only slaves and the children of immigrants willingly give up their languages, and no state has ever become economically powerful through the medium of a second language alone. It is a myth that only monolingual countries have been economically successful. We are no longer struggling for access to the classroom door. It's not only being in that school. When you are in that school, what do you actually learn? And this is the new problem. Now that we know, with the Freedom Charter, we said, let the doors of learning be open. And the doors of learning are opened in both basic and higher education, and still The most important is the issue of epistemic justice, epistemic injustice, social justice, because as we came in, we leave even with degrees and go back to Kailicha or to Nyanga. Everywhere in Africa, there's a struggle taking place between, this is what Neville said, between those of us who realize that for the next few generations of, at least there is no hope, next few generations at least, there's no hope of English becoming the universal second language of the people of the continent. On the one hand, and those on the other hand, who cynically or even sincerely promote the illusion that it is possible. And some people really believe that it can. And they've been dedicating their lives. You see with the age that you get in the department, with all the proliferation of programs in schools trying to facilitate this switch so that Black people can speak better English. And they waste money trying to teach English to Black people who don't get it anyway at the end. They are semi-lingual, they don't do home language well, and they don't do English well because there's no science to it. It's simply an illusion. In his paper titled English Unassignable but Unattainable, he says, the first of all, what I call Tollefson's paradox, according to which inadequate language competence is not due to poor text and materials, learners' low motivation, inadequate learning theories and teaching methodologies. There is a lot of time spent in the system by well-meaning, well-intentioned academics and government officials and everyone, including the donor community and partners, trying to get better materials, better class sizes, better everything. There's this syndrome, the more the better. It's like buying a big swimming pool for a child who can't swim, even if there's marble tiles around it. So, you can have better toilets, better everything, but if you are not addressing what it is that that child will live with, we are defocused with the more syndrome and realizing that there actually isn't more, because South Africa is not growing as an economy because of the system that we are maintaining. Everything else that we are trying to do with better and more and PhDs and methodologies and more, it's not working. And Eckhart Wolff said, language is not everything in education, but without language, everything is nothing in education. And the penny is dropping slowly because we've done everything. Now, we have a cognitive dissonance that we see in the system now. That although we are this vibrant linguistic tapestry in South Africa, we still face challenges and it presents complex questions about educational methodologies and linguistic policies. Now, historically, we know that for Black children, education in the mother tongue is supposed to be 3 years. But we don't have mother tongue education in the foundation phase because universities like UCT, UWC, all these universities produce B.Ed foundation phase graduates who are going to be unable to go and teach in the mother tongue because nobody prepared them. So the quality of such institutions ends at graduation. After that, teachers sink or swim because nobody has done any training for them to go and teach in African languages. It is only English and Afrikaans graduates. So when they graduate up the stairs, you must know that it only ends there. So teachers in township schools and rural areas are using their own devices and agency to try to get children to read. And all the packages that we have given to them are how English is taught, including the caps of the education department. The curriculum that we use is a transposition and a translation from English to African languages, and you expect kids to read. And you write articles about 81% of children who can't read for meaning, and you look at the department. All of us have been co-conspirators against children. We have no legal basis to do what we are all doing. Basic education and higher education included, none of us. We have beautiful laws, we have beautiful policies. We want to feel and we profess democracy. We are democratic, we want an inclusive system. And yet not a single person in this country has taken the Department of Education to court for the right of children to learn in their mother tongue. We've been taken for toilets, for everything else, not a single one. So we can't celebrate each year the legacy of Neville if we are not addressing the elephant in the room. We can try and put up things around the issue, but we have been co-conspirators against Black children, all of us. What is mother tongue-based bilingual education in this context? It is not a focus on one language. And I think we had this discussion with Neville at Pricer, and I remember he had his cup of coffee that every time we would argue about things, he would grab a cup of coffee. And I remember there were colleagues around us, Kathleen, Hugh, Carol Bloch, Zola Wababa at the time, Ntombi, a whole group of us, we were discussing this issue of what do we call, how do we salvage and reclaim mother tongue education from being tarnished by apartheid in the 1976 era, in the Bantu education phase 1 era. Now, most people are saying we are glorifying English still if we are talking about bilingual education. But unfortunately, I'm going to show you why, while we are attending to a pedagogical problem, we must also understand and address the history of South Africa and how, in the minds of Black people, how mother tongue education is framed and the lens through which they look at it, and the fact that we have to understand that while we are addressing the issue of mother tongue education, we must also make it sexy to them because there's a history to it that you can wash away. The irony of coloniality, our language in education policy is based on choice. But there is no choice, actually, because the system is designed towards English and Afrikaans. If you choose mother tongue education, what are you choosing? Because there's no choice. No higher education institutions prepare for that. And in basic education, everything that goes on there, including initial teacher education and continuous professional teacher development, all those courses are in English. So what are you choosing? It is not a choice. There's a lot of research that has been done in the country throughout, whether it's about bilingual and multilingual education models, biliteracy, literacy, mother tongue-based bilingual education, or as some people argue, it should be mother tongue-based multilingual education, or it should be mother tongue home language education, and all of these. And, academics have time to do that. We don't. There are children in classrooms. And each day, those children, they fall through the cracks. So it's like, Kat Komarek of the GTZ used to say, Africa is like a pregnant woman who never gives birth. Because there's research after research and this study and that one, and none of those translate to any actions because we are still trying to fight about what is the most appropriate terminology or conceptualization. There's a place for that, but while we are doing that, work must happen. What is obvious with what we have is that post-colonialism, post-independence, post-apartheid, mother tongue education has dropped in the number of years. I remember when I was in school, I had about 5 years of mother tongue education. It came from 8 years then with Bantu education. And at the time, when the government in 1953 put together Bantu education for Black people, we all know it was because of the UNESCO recommendation, that report on the use of vernacular languages in education. And from that time, when UNESCO said, maintain mother tongue for 3 years, since 1953 to 2024, we've been holding on to a 1953 recommendation. There's no policy that says Black people must change in grade 4. And yet all of us facilitate this change. We design courses around this. And UNESCO has had several reports from 1953 to now. And yet, we are a democratic country. It's important for us to have clarifications of modeling about what it would mean for South Africa. But what we know is that when you speak about the role of language in education, it should be mediating learning and teaching. It should not be a barrier to literacy. Grades 1, 2, and 3, all children have access to some form of mother tongue education. But when it comes to grade 4, moving up, it is black children who then switch. And what do we call a system that favors a group over the other? It is called racism. There is no other name for it. It is institutional racism, colleagues, and we've put up processes and systems to legitimize what we do. There is no other name for it. But there's a reason for that, and Neville speaks about this reason. It is called the English as a second language market. And what is important about it is that even then, in 1999, he said globalization, the English second language industry, and the underdevelopment of African languages. In recent years, scholars such as Philipson or Tovey, Skutnap Kangas said they have established the existence of what has been called the ESL industry and have criticized the pernicious effects of this industry on the development of indigenous languages and implementation of multilingual language policies then. But what they could not anticipate and what has never been quantified is how much this market, is making from keeping Africa and all these underdeveloped countries being English mainly, because there are 3 drivers to this market. It's education, academic reading, basic education, and business. Those 3. So it is by design. It's not a mistake. So when you say black parents choose English, please, it's an insult. Where there are markets, you choose because you don't know that yearly, in 2023, it was valued at approximately $61.5 billion and is expected to grow at a compound annual growth at CAGR of over 20%. Now, if you have a business growing so rapidly, you know that this is what we are sitting with. It has nothing to do with the fact that English is good for you. It is because it is a commodity that is sold. And anyone who speaks this language in government, you run the risk of being dealt with. Because these people come with packages that are already designed to ensure that we do better in English. All children have a right to English and good English because it will allow them to interact. Part of the multilingual tapestry that we have, we must ensure that all children have good access to English, but it can't be at the expense of their education. Because right now we know that it is not scientific, it is not educational for them, for the subtractive model that we are using, because they are not getting the English that is required for them. So anything that we are dealing with right now is because that we are trying to turn the tide. And if in 1999 we said there is no money for multilingualism, and you are still saying in 2024, where is the money? We will not have any money because all the money goes and comes and must feed this market. There's a war that's happening between English and Spanish, and most people are not even aware of this. You will see that the problem with this war is that I see Brian coming next to me. I have my own here. The problem with this war is summarized on this slide. Because there are very few people who are native speakers of English, it's 4.6, 373 million, that's the estimate in the world of native English speakers. There are only 4.6% native English speakers. On the other side, this market depends on this 25% of consumers who are English as a second language speakers. Now, if you have a market that is based on people who are not native language speakers, it is your responsibility, if you are a business person, to ensure that you have more people who are speaking that language so that your products can be sold there. Now, if you look at English, with their 26% in terms of the spoken languages, you go to Spanish, you see that 86% of people speak Spanish natively. So the competition between the two and this one moving that one out of the English second language of the language market, you see that this competition continues and it will drive the language policies of governments depending on which G2G government-to-government cooperations are there. And we are not aware of this. So it will be rosier, the packages will be rosier, and there'll be more money, more scholarships, more these packages coming, because the players are vociferous, because it's a business. It's a baseline at the end. There must be a margin. What does it mean for us? We see that there's the mischief in learner performance is that those children who have English and Afrikaans home language, which is matching with the language of learning and teaching, those children in the system, it's the stark reality right now, is that the performance, the gap between them is that these ones by grade 6, the gap is so wide that there's no way that by the end of schooling, they will be on par. And these children who don't have that match, we predispose them to vulnerability in terms of future employment, health, and poverty. As much as we don't want to use race as a lens in education, unfortunately, underperformance in South Africa has a color, and that color is black, and it is a class, and that class is black and poor. One of the indictments of the system is what happens in grade 4. You see with this slide that in grade 4, between grade 4 and 5, the number of children who drop out in grade 4 when the switch happens is 57,000. Just in grade 4. So while everybody prepares for this switch in grade 4, you must know actually that we are feeding into a system where we know who's going to go and work in Kentucky and clean your house. Now, if you lose 57,000 children in 1 year, why are we sitting here when we know now? If you didn't know, you must know now that this is what it has taken for the penny to slowly drop. The foundation phase model is quite a strong one because you see in the foundation phase, and I just taken maths because we're concentrating around the 2 subjects for now. We are scratching where it itches the most. It's not that all other subjects are not important, but we are concerned that not only are African language children poor in literacy, they are poor in numeracy, and they are struggling with the subjects that are language reduced. So in the foundation phase, we have children who are doing more or less the same in terms of getting distinctions in mathematics. Grades 1, 2, and 3, we have a model there, and see what mother tongue education can do if all children have access to it. But once we switch, we begin to see this. This is the data that we see. And the more you go up the system with the cognitive load, the worse it gets. This graph summarizes for us what is out there in the system. That with the red, those are children who are performing above 50% to 100%, and the green are those children who are performing below 50%. And that green, after grade 4, you see it going up and up and up and up and up. And that is why it is black children who sleep at school when they have to write grade 12. Morning classes, evening classes, winter schools, summer schools, and all of that. And nobody asks, why is the black children who need to sleep in mattresses at school? And the psychological effect of knowing that for me to do well, I must sleep at school on a mattress. This is just an analysis of our results, and you see that with African language children, in 2015 then, in mathematics participation and performance, they got 43%. White kids got 96%. So-called colored children got 60%. And Neville would scream at me for these classifications. He would go mad. But the reason we're doing this is because we can't turn a blind eye to the fact that this helps us to attend to the problem. Because pretending that they are not there is not assisting the system. And you see that the race profile of these children, that they are doing well in the system. And for black children, this is how they are performing in grades 12 as they leave. So you know already who's going to be more in your maths and science courses at UCT or UWC or any other university, because this is what the system is churning out. That was 2015. Now this is 2023, the latest. At last, we got black children to crash through the 60%. We've got the so-called colored group crashing to going to the 70s. So a system that is designed around this is going to produce this for you. And this is what we are trying to reverse with mother tongue-based bilingual education. On the 21st of February, 2024, the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, announced the rollout of what we call the mother tongue-based bilingual education. And this is where Neville, wherever he is, we attribute this to him. That it's not only going to be a change now in grade 4, while children are learning English, they learn through it. We are saying it must not happen. It should never have happened. For the first time since democracy, DBE, the Department of Basic Education, will align the teaching that is happening, because no teacher is teaching only in English. It's a fallacy, and we want to maintain that. Somehow we want to believe it. Teachers are teaching in English. They are not. They are moving between the languages. They are translanguaging. They are making sure that children learn, because teaching is happening, but no learning is happening. And we are going to be aligning that with assessment. The green that you see there with MTBBE exams in the middle, for the first time in grades 4 in 2025, we will have that bilingual exam. No longer will it be that we see in the matric examinations children writing in big, leaving out a 10 marks section or 20 marks in maths or in science and physics, that andiuva umuso. I don't understand the question. And you don't start it in grades 12. That is why we are trying to make sure that from grades 4, we allow them that opportunity. We don't want to be told by PELs anymore, by an international test, that our kids can read. We're strengthening our own system so that it is the mother tongue-based framework that informs the system, because we already have it for Afrikaans and English children. The same thing before literacy. Literacy is the same. Although South Africa did not do well in the PELs, but English and Afrikaans kids were top. We can't have this system anymore. Brian, I still have my few minutes. There are strategic aims to the mother tongue-based bilingual education plan. And I'm leaving this for you, colleagues. And the framework is attached there for you. But I want to stay on this slide. What are the implications for our education? Particularly education faculties. Language matters. It matters who is teaching those courses. From ECD to university. It matters what is being taught from ECD to university. It matters how it is being taught. And it matters what is assessed and in which languages. It matters who is doing well and who is not doing well. And not just what, but the how. It really matters what we can do in the short, medium, and long term to self-correct. So in developing training courses for initial teacher education and in-service teacher education programs, consideration must be held to address teaching, learning, and assessment needs, so that the bi- or multilingual education agenda, transformation agenda, is realized. Because we can no longer say it does not matter who is teaching that course and the support that we give to students. So we implore, as basic education, that you've been complaining about DBE not doing, and I want to accept that we have not done well, but we've started, and not starting is not an option. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naledi. Thank you so much for your passion, that energy. Okay. What do you need? Hey, colleagues, actually, I look forward to the discussions later on. Now we're going to move to the second part of our session, which is the video, and then we will conclude with the panel.
Xa sifunda ngamalwimi amabini ngeelanguage eziyi-2, we are finding new ways to learn and we find it easy to learn. If kukhona igama le-English, obviously khona nelesiXhosa.
Kwi-maths nesayensi nyhani bekuthiwa uba bakhona amagama afike ephumbe stick enzima nyhani, but if wayicaciselwa ngesiXhosa soze ungayibambi.
Asikwazi ukufunda nge-English. English iyasixakamisa.
Abanye abantu bafeyliswa yile nto bengayi-understandanga question because of ibhalwe nge-English.
Abanye abantwana baye bacinga ubana zizilolena kanti abazizilolena baxakwa yi-English.
I-English nayo ibalulekile, funeka sikwazi ucommunicate nabanye abantu abangabaXhosa, but ayikhombi into yoba isiXhosa sisifunda because isiXhosa ekugqibeleni ilanguage yethu. And ke xa sizojonga ilanguage yethu phantsi, irongo loo nto.
Hi Carol. Hi Kathy. Njani? Many African language speaking learners in schools learn through the medium of the home language from grade 1 to grade 3. And then when they switch to grade 4, all the subjects have to be taught in English. That is the grade where we experience most problems because the children are not proficient enough in English to learn through it. And so the learners are sitting there listening to a teacher speaking a foreign language to them, and they are expected to function as home language speakers of English.
Do you think that middle-class English-speaking parents would accept their children who've come to school with their 6 years of English by the time they get to grade 1, learning, say, isiZulu for 2 to 3 hours in grade 1 and 2, and in grade 3 for 3 to 4 hours, and then in grade 4 having everything in isiZulu, every single textbook, every single assessment, expected to write only in isiZulu, to speak only in isiZulu, and the teacher only addressing them in isiZulu? I'm sure there would be an uproar.
Basingajonga kwakhona phaya kwi-policy lena sinayo e-national iyayiqaphela into yoba zikhona ezingxaki bezikhona in the past kwixesha elidlulileyo elibangele ukuba ezinye iilwimi zibe ziyadobelelwa zezinye iilwimi. Ngoku ke urhulumente makenze kangangoko uqinisekisa ukuba ezi lwimi zinikwa ifuthe nazo, ziyancediswa ekukhuleni, kwaye ukuziqaphela oku i-recognition yazo nayo iyenzeka.
Really, it's the legacy of colonialism and of apartheid, where what was associated with whiteness was valorized, while everything that was associated with African languages, with being African, was devalued.
Schools generally get one allocated textbook per subject. When faced with the choice between an English textbook and an African language textbook, schools tend to prefer the English monolingual textbook. But the grade 4 learners, for example in science, can't read that textbook independently. They need a lot of help to unpack it from the teacher. But the African language textbooks are not popular with the schools because of the ideological challenges that we've had.
That is why most of the learners are very problematic. Some of them, they disturb in the classroom because they are frustrated. They are just sitting there, they don't understand anything. Language is a barrier, and it has affected many people in the past. Some people ended up dropping out of school because of the language they don't understand. So if you're asking a grade 4 learner a question in English, the child's mind will have to translate that first into their mother tongue, and then they have to translate it back to English. So I think now if they hear something that is asked in isiXhosa, so it makes their lives easy.
The problems that we experience then are that the learners are not learning. They are warming seats every day. They are memorizing if they are learning in English, but they can't engage in the classroom. They find it hard to participate, and creativity is stifled in the classrooms where children cannot express themselves. Because of the problem of excluding learners' languages, meaning African languages in education, we've implemented 2 bilingual education projects. Isayensi Yetu, Our Science, in a primary school, and Languaging for Learning project in secondary schools.
In these kind of contexts, many teachers would code switch or use the learner's home language as a resource for learning, but they would do that surreptitiously, secretly. A teacher talked about smuggling the vernacular into the classroom.
When my HOD was there,
I would like teach in English the whole lesson. But when he's not there, I would code switch and only switch to their language when I see that now the room is just tense, there's no learning happening.
We do it privately. We were still in this. By the time you give us this chance, then you give us the opportunity to do it freely. This line, we call it y is equal to x. Xa line engu y is equal to x is a mathematical language ethetha the line ethini diagonal. Banoza sichazele siXhosa siyibeka njani? Lo horizontal nangu. Ocatheni ocambaleleyo.
And so what we wanted to do with the Languaging for Learning project was to build on teachers' existing bilingual languaging skills and to develop these into a coherent, legitimated, trans-languaging, multilingual pedagogy.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you the questions, 5 pages, each person. And also I'm going to distribute the dictionaries. Beka etafuleni A1 sizibe 3 sithi elicala malisebenze nge-dictionaries 1 2 3 tables. Looking for the keywords in home language, some are underlining, then you will draw the table and translate the words to home language.
Traditionally, we've had a lot of monolingual English curriculum-aligned materials, and slowly but surely the DBE has started to commission African language materials as well as they look to roll out mother tongue-based bilingual education up to the end of primary school. But we haven't had any bilingual resources that are curriculum-aligned. So we decided to have a go, and a team of writers created Isaansi Yetu, the booklet that we created during 2022. And it was really a response to the lack of bilingual learning materials that are around for our children from grade 4 and beyond.
At the beginning, I remember when we brought the booklets to school, they were all shocked. They were asking themselves, oh, is science ngeXhosa? And they didn't read through the material to see that this is not only isiXhosa, it was both isiXhosa and English mixed together and representing the way they teach the subject in a class. But they, at the beginning, continued to challenge us, saying, this won't work. But at some point, I remember asking themselves, aren't you teaching a subject in both languages? What is different from what you have at hand with what you enact in a classroom? And then they started realizing that, oh, no, let's just give it a chance.
There are different kinds of bilingual education. I promote the kind of bilingual education that uses both languages simultaneously as means for teaching and learning. As a teacher, that means that I can explain concepts in 2 languages, and sometimes I can start teaching in another language, but the activity can be in another language. That is called trans-languaging.
What we did in the materials was that we tried out a number of different strategies to show bilingual text. So in some parts of the materials, there is an isiXhosa paragraph followed by an English paragraph, and the same content is presented in both languages. But then we have other parts of the booklet where the bilingualism is much more fluid. So the register or the language in which the text is written moves from English to isiXhosa quite fluidly, and it tries to echo the way that teachers and learners work orally in the classroom.
It allows the children to draw on their linguistic resources. They have these languages, but they might not be at an equal level.
So we're wanting to model a situation where teachers can draw on all the resources in the classroom, even in a text that is bilingual in English and isiXhosa. They can go beyond that.
So connect to the red side up, so then now 30 voltmeter ane thathani lento niconnecte le side sifuna uyijonga kutheni ngalight niyabona uba kwenzeka nto. That's why it was not light ane yeah okay mayime still please niyabona yeah.
Abantwana bethu into ibabetha kakhulu esababethayo kuzi-expressa Uyafumanisa uba ngezinye imini bayayazi impendulo ne, but they can't express themselves ngendlela abafuna ngayo. So le project ibanceda kakhulu uba umntana le nto ayicingayo ayibhale ngolu hlobo ayicinga ngalo.
In South Africa, we register few learners in grade 12 who are doing sciences. And with the bilingual teaching, we will definitely increase the number of learners who are now going to be doing maths and science in the country.
Before we get ourselves in this program, I have myself an attitude saying that how are we going to do this, because we don't have that much vocab for our content subjects. But as we are involving ourselves in this program, I saw it was possible. First of all, you teach the learners with something, with some knowledge they know. Then here and there, we consult the dictionaries, we consult the textbooks, and then we allow them to express themselves in Xhosa, and then anyone who is able to translate that in English, they do so. And I can see now they are improving, all of them. They are able to take a question from English to Xhosa and from Xhosa to English.
The children that were more fluent in English were always that I thought of as the brightest in class, were clever ones. But when I started allowing them to discuss, and sometimes I would say you can respond in English and then you can ask someone to translate what you're saying in class, everybody was more keen to participate in class. So that was fascinating for me, because it's exactly what you were saying. They're using both languages as resources.
It was not easy at the beginning because I'm not a fluent speaker of isiXhosa. So in my class, I was using English only. Now that they are free to answer using their home language and also present using their home language, the learner knows that science is not only in English, but science can be done also in my language. Even me as a teacher, I'm learning.
Natural sciences in a concept kwa grade 4 the English, of which good difficult abantwana ukuzigraspa because beqhele ilanguage yesiXhosa foundation phase. So sesavula kakhulu because abantwana bayakwazi ukuexpressa bathethe bakwazi uphendula eklasini.
Important results I think that we noticed was, first of all, the teacher spoke about the participation levels increased in the classroom because learners felt confident to use any language to express themselves. They didn't have to provide a perfect English answer every time.
They are willing to go to the board, they are willing to answer, sometimes they are competing. There are many posters that they've done by themselves. They are more and more active. They enjoy working alone as a group more than me telling them what to do.
This project, this initiative is one big breakthrough in the history of teaching. So I support it because I also can see the results. For the first time, you can see the kids can express themselves in their mother tongue.
We managed to get one focus class to write a bilingual test, English and isiXhosa, and the other classes wrote the traditional English-only test. And those learners who wrote the bilingual test outperformed the monolingual English learners by a big margin. We had an 81% pass rate in the bilingual test and a 51% pass rate in the monolingual English test.
That was so mind-blowing for me when I saw the learners performing with high marks, because now they can write either in isiXhosa or in English versus the learners who were writing only in English and didn't do well at all. I think we need to give the platform to our learners to become the leaders of science by teaching them in their mother tongue.
So often teachers are blamed for whatever the ills in education. But we've just been so impressed and moved by the way teachers have committed themselves, solved problems, gone the extra mile, despite the very challenging circumstances they work under.
Teaching learners that their home language or their own languages can be valued among other languages, that there is no other language that is superior to the other. So that gives them the confidence to participate and then see and value themselves as equally as the other languages.
These learners, they see that they are valued even if they speak Xhosa. So they are taken serious as intellectual beings.
I do think that we are seeing a change now, and that's what's really exciting. If we look at the student movements, Rhodes Must Fall, Fees Must Fall, the calls for free decolonized education, people are understanding and embracing what is African and realizing that actually what we have with only Western European languages and Western education is not actually rich enough and complex enough for us to solve the problems of our world.
Kukho abantwana who struggle ufunda ngesixhosa, then kubekho abastruggle ukufunda nge-English. But to me, I would think it's important to learn both languages.
Xa sifunda sithatha amagama from English siwase siXhosa, then sibhale iposter, then sipresente efront, then sibhale uba sifunde ntoni ngaloo magama. Ii-materials zakwaZanele zisinceda kakhulu, especially dictionaries, because akhona amanye amagama kwi-English esinocinga uba anzima kakhulu, but xa siyitranslate to isiXhosa siyabona okay la magama lilula eli gama, but i-English le isibhida kakhulu.
Into endingayi-advise uba bengenziwa kwezinye izikolo uba like abantu baka-basic education ba-produce more dictionaries uba enzela uba zonke izikolo benazii-dictionaries zesiXhosa neze-English.
Asikho bade kakhulu kwi-English, so isiXhosa siyasazi, sisithetha emakhaya esitratweni, and ilanguage esiyisebenzisa 100% xa sisemakhaya. So ke ngoku iyasinceda ke ngoku ukuba xa sisebenzisa zombini iyasibhalansisa, sithi uba sizoyiyeka i-English yaqha senze ibhalansi.
There are many things that need to be in place, but I believe that we have to start with our mindset. At the moment, our mindset is oriented monolingually. We think monolingually. South Africa is a multilingual country in a multilingual continent. So we have to start orienting our minds towards a multilingual orientation where we base our teaching from a multilingual perspective.
What teachers really need is the go ahead. Use language as a resource in whatever way you want, and to have that ban on the learner's home language lifted. Let's work multilingually. Let's empower the learners. Let's empower the teachers. I mean, after all, learning through a language you understand is surely a human right.
Okay, thanks, colleagues. Change of plans. So I'm going to give you the mic for you to give your comments or questions first, and then I'll get the colleagues to conclude. Yeah? No, because I think, Bisakil, I'm afraid actually, otherwise you won't have any time to give your inputs or ask your questions. Okay, do we have a mic that's roaming? Okay, there's a mic there for anybody. Okay, so we've got 1, 2. Any other hand? Okay, 3.
4. Where's one? Can one put up your hand?
Morning, everyone. I was just about to leave because I'm rushing off to somewhere else. But I just got so emotional as I was sitting at the back, and just after the presentation, actually I started being emotional during the presentation, and when I was watching the video, because I'm thinking to myself, I didn't go to school during apartheid. But I realized that that transition that took place from grade 4 until grade 12, it's still affecting me now. And in terms of how I articulate myself, the confidence in public, at work. I just deregistered from an MPhil in African Studies because I was struggling with language. So I realized that I actually need to go back and learn the language, the academic language. But yet I'm still catching up with the English itself. So I just realized that I am not a special case. But what made me emotional is the fact that there are still people who are going through that transition and who are caught up in a system, and later on they will think they're incompetent or they are lazy or they can't think. But that's not the problem. The problem is that we are still sort of in a system that is very oppressive, and it's still reproducing people like myself who end up in a situation where you are stuck and you know that you have brains, but you can't progress because there was a transition that happened when you were in primary school. Thank you. Thanks for that presentation.
Thanks so much. My name is Lawrence Munyai from Umtapo Center. I think, Dr. Mbude, you actually make a startling, I think, input into this process. But I think one of the issues that we need to look at is the stakeholders that are involved in education. What government have done post-1994 is to center power on the school governing bodies. And if this process is not going to target SGBs as critical stakeholders, it will be a challenge, because I think amongst parents, there's a notion that when you're not learning in English, you're not actually learning. Now, I think part of what we have done at Umtapo was to establish peace forums in communities, for out of school youth, and peace clubs for youth in schools, but we have educators as well that we work with. And I think creating a linkages between institutions of higher learning and our basic education is quite critical, because it seems we work in compartments, like we compartmentalize. Say you are an institute of higher learning, you are there, and we are here. We are a basic education platform, whether secondary schools or primary schools. So I think those are areas that perhaps we may need to sort of like bridging the gap, because students that are institutions of higher learning as well as learners in high school can be able to interface, and those that are institutions of higher learning can support those that are in basic education. So I think those are some of the things that perhaps we may need to look at. Thanks very much.
3.
Thanks. Just my name's Asher. 2 things really quickly. I mean, I was just so horrified to know that people can't speak, that teachers run away from speaking vernac in classrooms when the HOD is there. I mean, that's like really old colonial situation. It was really terrifying and horrifying to hear. And secondly, a question for Dr. Mbute. What does the DA in the Ministry of Basic Education mean for these kinds of attempts nationally? Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that pointed question. Okay, I'll take a few more hands. A few more? Okay, it's 1 more. Is there any more? It's just 1? Okay, let's go. Can you help us with the mic there? Comrade there?
Sorry, we have some feedback. Whoever's got mics that is not speaking, just switch them off.
Thank you. I'm just interested in, I don't know, I'm sure there are experts on the panel who can explain how we've moved from the idea of a standard sort of unitary language. You know, what is a language? I remember long ago we were taught that things like code switching are bad and you must keep the languages separate and pure. I guess it's a bit like a sort of race ideology. And I'm just wondering, you must have done research on translanguaging, and how has that shifted our conceptualization of a language, and what does that actually mean for going forward? You know, should we all just translanguage? Is that the way to go? Or do you sort of, I'm just wondering, you know, where does it go? Do you eventually sort of end up with pure languages? Is that the goal or not? Thanks.
Okay, so let me start with you. Yeah.
This is called bullying. First of all, I think I'm a teacher, I always stand. So don't mind my standing. What does not help, I don't know what her name is, Usisi, as she left, is when you have academics writing articles about the loveless teaching or education system that puts a burden and a deficit narrative on teachers. The problem is with the teachers or that don't care, particularly Black teachers or Black learners or Black parents. You know, somehow we have normalized what we have understood to be what the problem is. We don't realize the long-term effects of what happens in grade 4. That's why I call it the guillotine year. Because it's not only what happens in grade 4, it's what happens lifelong. So when children hit educators in Black schools, when teachers hit children, everything that you see happening in Black education, and we come up with these programs to psychosocial support, and that is attending to the symptoms. It is important work, but it attends to the symptoms of why just by being Black you become violent. There is no way that it is possible. So it's important that we affirm what we have not done or what we have done. So I really felt that as she was speaking, she goes back, and this is why I go back to my own childhood and why I get so annoyed by being compared to Brazil and China and Germany, you know, with these pearls. These are kids who don't have the problems that we have. So when the education department wants to leave these tests, it is academics who say, what are you hiding? When the department has allocated this 5% for Black children as band-aid compensation in grade 12, it is academics that say, why do you prop up results? Why is it 30% and not 50%? Without doing anything about equalizing the system. So it is fine for us to just attend to those things that are going to appear as if we want quality, because quality for some people does not even begin to address the issue of equity. So we must begin to change our narrative, because whatever we do in the system maintains what she just explained now. I'm glad she's saying, I know that I'm not the only one. It's all of us, but we need to move towards that. Sorry about digressing. But the issue that you are raising, Lawrence, about the Bella Bill, and I think it links to what Asha was saying. When we centralized, the system centralizes power to parents. And this is what is the issue with clause 4 and clause 5 of the Bella Bill. We didn't even had to get to an act to amend clause 4 and 5, or to include clause 4 and 5 of the Bella Bill, because in the South African schools law, section 6 of the act that regulates school governance, the power that SGBs have is not absolute. Let's start there. It is because in a system where people do what they please, officials of government do not, one, they are not capacitated to attend to the fact that we shouldn't have a school governing body that operates like like a federal system. We shouldn't have that. Because that power, Lawrence, is subject to the Constitution. It's very clear. Section 6 is very clear. 6.2 says SGBs of schools may, not must. If we had officials of government who were able to rally SGBs to ensure that as they do what they have been doing all these years, it is because of the incapacity of government. One, to know what the law says, and two, to make sure where they have been doing all these things, we say to them, this is illegal. But because of the power dynamics in this country, if an SGB of a powerful school takes the department to court, in most instances, we know what happens with the judiciary. It's a power dynamic. So we are stuck there because clause 4 says, when you admit, make sure that language, and this is a constitutional provision, you can't discriminate on the basis of language or race or whatever it is. Religion, birth, and so on. So you ask yourself, and you've been having these engagements, we had meetings with AfriForum and all Solidarity and all of these organizations. What is the problem with clause 4? What is it? And then you realize that we are sitting in that war of 1899 to 1902 called the Anglo-Boer War. And this is the anxiety that we are sitting with. And the truth about that anxiety is that where English is present, it chows up because of its hegemonic nature. So the Afrikaner is, in their mind, is justified that we are worried that the more we open the doors of the schools that are Afrikaans, the more English will take up. And this is true. They see in African language schools what is happening with low proficiency and low academic performance, and they worry about their children. But it does not justify the fact that mother tongue education must only be for Afrikaans kids. So you see that there are historical issues that people are not pronouncing, but also they lie at the heart of what you are dealing with. Clause 5 of the Bella Act says, before you say this is the language policy of this school, get it to the HOD first to say this is fine. And that power is an assumed power. Because legally, and that's why there's no court case still about the Bella Bill. Because they know that constitutionally, the head of department in each province is given a right and a responsibility to make sure that as children are learning and as children are accessing education, the head of department has a responsibility to ensure that whoever you are, if there's a space in that school, the language policy of that school cannot hinder or be a barrier for that child coming to that school. So wanting to have a single medium school is fine. It's one of the models of bilingualism. But you must demonstrate how you will attend to the other language groups. It can't just be about your language. Because in this country, our constitution is transformative. It's not only your right, it's also about Brian's right and everybody else's right. So you see where this problem is located. I will not answer any questions about the DA. About any political party. I am a civil servant. And the law is the law. It does not matter who is in the office. The Constitution is the Constitution, and as long as it has not been changed, we will make sure that we implement, we give effect to the Constitution for all children. And I think the academics here will answer the issue of translanguaging. We have a very hot discussion in a group that we have formulated amongst academics in this country who are already doing the work that they're doing in their small corners. We realize that the disconnect between higher education and basic education is not helping us. Because the more people who graduate with degrees, the less transformation happens. You profess to be a Democrat, and then you go and do exactly the opposite because of Anglo-normativity. So we've formed this group. There are about 200 of us, or 180 the last time I checked, and we keep conversing and we fight. And it's a space and a platform for us to fight. Now, colleagues, just going back to your question about what we understand about language and code mixing, being wrong at the time, you are correct that, there was that. The model we are using for implementation of MTBBE is Mother Tongue-Based Bilingual Education for 2025, is one that we are saying. Because of the unequal position of African languages to English, remember the models that we have of bilingualism and multilingualism are European models. Now take, for example, where the work around translanguaging has been happening in Garcia and with Spanish and English. Although Spanish has less value in the United States, but there's a country called Spain where all education and materials are in Spanish. So there's a heritage country. And every time people ask me about those people who speak Hindi and Gujarati, and say, at least they know that they can get all the materials from India. But for African languages, there's nowhere else to go. So the power dynamics in bilingualism in South Africa are different. So we can't just take a model of translanguaging and say it's going to be boundless. Because we have a responsibility to first make sure that the system makes strong that has been eroded over the years. So while we speak about translanguaging, there must be a model that attends to the African language because it is in the minority now. When you speak about mother tongue education in Europe, you are talking about education for immigrants, actually. Because it is taking as a norm that education is in your language, is in the home language. So because of that kind of power dynamic, we have said it's going to be 80% mother tongue and 20% English. If we don't do that, we run the risk of English being hegemonious and taking over African languages. And that is the problem that we are sitting with. So we must come up with a South African model. That's why we are imploring education faculties and all higher education to concentrate on the issue of mother tongue education so that we can come up with truly South African models to attend to our problems. Thanks. I'm not sure whether... I'm old now.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to comment on the last question, Kathy, that you asked about languages as bounded autonomous objects versus this fluidity of language that translanguaging brings. So I think the first point to say is, if we can explain it like this, race is a social construction, but in everyday life, we know that we can't pretend that it doesn't have material effects and it doesn't exist in the way that people organize things and so on. It's similar with language, that there's no separate things. Okay. In the brain doesn't have, language is not biological. It's not like Spanish, English, isiXhosa is this biological element. It's a social construction like race is. But it's come to, through long periods of time, humans have given value on these different social constructions, right? And we can't ignore that. So in applied linguistics, sociolinguistics, we talk about first order languaging, which is the way that people use language every day. We think, even if we think we're monolingual, in South Africa, nobody is monolingual. Even white kids who coming out of school, they had to pass a first additional language at grade 12 level. So there's no monolingual in South Africa, but people are not aware of how they move across different ways of speaking in their daily life. Nobody speaks pure language like it's written in a textbook. That's the written form, right? So that is our first level, first order languaging. Second order languaging is where you label the languages, you name them, you fix them. And we do that for education purposes, right? So we can say when children come into school, whatever language they speak, they have not been schooled into the formal
second order language, right? So how we try to solve this problem in relation to translanguaging, African languages, English and so on, is that we say that we need to work with both of those constructs. So the reality is that we want children and we want teachers to use freely their language resources in the classroom that they bring to the classroom. That is a fundamental resource that they have to be able to access in order to progress. But we also need, with the kind of idea of strategic essentialism that came through, feminism, that we need to have strategic essentialism for named African languages because they have been so marginalized and neglected. So this is a power struggle, and we are working. It's not easy, but we are working with both of those constructs in order to try to get the best outcome for our kids so that they can use their resources to learn, but they can also master the standard languages which they're going to be judged on when they write assessments and write other material.
I'll just add to what has been said by both Dr. Mbute and Carol here, in that in translanguaging, while working with translanguaging, you also want to monolingualize. You want to do both, right? That's what they've said, because we have to get to learn and give children access to valued forms of language, right? Which are standard languages that are used separate, monolingualisms that are used. You want to give them access to that, but you do not stop them from languaging in the way that they language in everyday life. So some of those strategies come into the classroom where, for example, when you ask learners to translate from one text to another, that is one form of monolingualizing, right? You're moving from English to isiXhosa or from isiXhosa to English. And in the translation of text, children work with both languages. We've seen how they work, for example, in group work, when they are working on translation. What they say orally, if you record it, is actually translingual. But what they put on paper is monolingual, because they are using the two languages to negotiate meaning, which they then, in the final text, put out there as the final isiXhosa text or as the final English text. So these are some of the strategies that we use bilingually, but also bilinguals are also interpreters. So they interpret, they translate, they code switch, they use one linguistic repertoire when they mix the languages, they do all sorts of things. But we do not value or affirm their languaging practices. If you look at the curriculum, you do not see languaging practices by multilinguals stated as being able to, as an outcome, being able to translate text, being able to interpret text. That doesn't come in the curriculum. So that is ignored, which means that the curriculum is only geared to the monolinguals and to the standard languages only. So we see with multilingual children that you can produce multilingual word walls. You can produce texts that are written in different languages. And in doing so, again, in group work, in more complex multilingual spaces, when you do group work, each child brings their own language resources. So if you want a multilingual poster, a Sotho child will speak Sesotho, will take part of that Sesotho aspect. A Xhosa child will take charge of the Xhosa aspect, and another child will use another language. And then you produce your multilingual poster. So each child has contributed equally to the project that needs to be done for school using the different languages. But currently we see when we only insist only on one language, the children do not surface their other resources that they have. They only have to work with one. So that's what I just wanted to add.
Okay. I think that I also forgot that when listening to Umagi Robin on the video, she said the department must officialize translanguaging in classrooms as a multilingual pedagogy. that is used already by teachers and learners because they use multilingualism and translanguaging surreptitiously, and that's correct. The department has issued Circular 18, S18 of 2024. We've done that. The Director General has signed that for all schools in South Africa. But I must say that there's an outcry. We are receiving as the department letters from teacher organizations that are saying, what about those teachers who can't speak African languages? It's a concern, and it's a genuine concern. But if, as Neville said earlier on, we are talking about learner-centered education, it can't be the fault of the child that they are not going to have access to their language because the teacher can't. It therefore puts a premium on higher education institutions to assist the DBE to ensure that our teachers are multilingual. It's going to be the same problem in higher education, that you don't do it because you can't speak any African language. It is important now that we know that we need to capacitate each other. It's a journey that we must all take up together, that English only is not enough. Afrikaans only is not enough. So it's either we wait until so many teachers speak African languages, or we say, where do we start? And we're starting with the child. And unfortunately, because of the rights of children, this is where we have to start. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll just add something briefly. I know we're at the end of the panel, maybe onto the translanguaging and what is language question. Around pedagogy, I think that the mother tongue-based bilingual education is a really exciting moment for teachers. So all of you who are involved in education, I think it has the potential to really unlock many different modes of meaning making. Okay, so once you move beyond static languages and start to be able to use all the resources, then suddenly bodies become a meaning-making resource and drawing becomes a meaning-making resource. So it's exciting. And I think for us, the area of text is particularly a frontier. We talk about the text frontier in African languages and in translanguaging. So when children use different languages, they should be encouraged. When languages are mixed in text, it's seen as a particularly negative thing or something to guard against. But if that can be encouraged, and I think social media can really lead the way. If you ask the matrics in Khayelitsha who studied for their physics exam on WhatsApp groups, that was not English. That was not happening in English. There was mixing. So sizokuthetha nge-photosynthesis namhlanje, and we're going to write to one another and answer. That's beautiful to see. So let the social media, let it lead the way, include it in classrooms, and we can also still have, as Xoli said, the monolingual texts and the translation. So it's exciting time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much, colleagues. Well, colleagues, we have run out of time. Yes. So what I'm going to suggest, actually, so there's quite a few people that work in this area, and they're in their room, and there are many of them. And we're going to go to tea, and I'm very, very happy that you discuss with people during tea break. Yeah, the time has run out. So the chairperson of the
Thank you.
meeting is she's standing.
I don't know about the tea story. Thank you so much.
Tea?
No.
Oh,
don't look.
Okay, sorry. But thank you very much, colleagues. And thank you so much, Naledi, Robin, Oli, and Carol.
One more round of applause. Well, so please, can we be sure to not leave, Nadima? We're catching up on time, and we will have tea, but it is not now. I'm handing immediately over to Noor, who is chairing the next session. Very exciting launch of the Sacred Archive project. Please do not move. Tea is in 1 hour. You will be okay. We're going to get there. Thank you, Noor.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Amandla. Free Palestine. My job is to make sure that no one goes to the toilet. And then, so I'm watching you, right? What must I do?
Keep your space there.
Skip your space?
They're going to have to do a whole range of...
Oh, I see. Okay, all right. Thanks very much, everyone. I think that we're going to get going immediately. So I'm very excited that we are launching the SACED website, the archive that a number of people have been working on for a few years. But let me just make a few as Lawrence and others get going. About, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, Louise, Enver, and John approached the history workshop at Wits University about the idea of creating an archive for SACED. And of course, without hesitation, we said that this is an excellent idea, but very importantly, that we needed to think about what we meant when suggested that a SACED archive should be created. It came at a very important moment when the idea of archives have been subject to important debate and scrutiny and critical interrogation. Because archives are complicated, right? For most people, archives are these kind of austere edifices in which documents are placed, stored, preserved. And we imagine that the archives are mainly custodial spaces where official archives are kept, government archives, state archives. And in that sense, archives are places of power. Archives are probably the original sites of erasure, about the colonial archive went in kind of 2 directions. The one direction has been an interesting and generated very productive ideas, but tended to be kind of satisfied with critiques of critiques, satisfied with simply making the critique and producing a lot of wonderful academic scholarship about the problems of the archive. And it's important to draw on that scholarship, but it's insufficient to be satisfied with critique. Out of that moment of the kind of critique of the colonial archive, something else has happened more slowly, perhaps more substantively, but I want to also suggest that the project, the SACED project, is part of something else taking shape. And that is the convening, not only in South Africa, but elsewhere in the world, and particularly across the continent as well, a movement that of radical activist archives, in which the critique of the archive is a starting point. But as with all things in our lives, we need to go beyond just critiquing. We need to kind of create the alternative in our critique. And the SACED archive is really a part of that movement, which is not new. It's been going on for a long time. Liberation movements have for many decades attempted to create their own archives. They have understood archiving as an activist, as an active project, not only of preserving their documents, preserving their memories, but understanding that the act of archiving was constitutive of movement building. That without the memories of how we have done things in the past, we can't really continue to recreate movements. And that movements have to be actively involved in creating their memories as they are building. And this may seem as a contradiction because often people who create archives at a later stage in their lives. So older people say, it's now time for me to kind of create my archive because I want to preserve my legacy so that people don't forget about me. And of course, that's an understandable mode of creating archives. But what the SACED project is about, and many other initiatives, is about creating archives at the moment that we are engaging in struggle, at the moment that we are making history, and not postpone it to some moment in our lives when we are concerned about our legacy, when we kind of understand that we are no longer going to be around soon, and therefore people mustn't forget about us. And secondly, it's about activism. It's about using the memory, the knowledge, the movement building as part of the work that we do. So the SACID archiving project is not just about Enver, Louise, John, and other people who've been part of SACID over many decades, saying that it's our legacy. There is that element, and there should be that element, because that's where the personal passion comes from. But it's also about, and I think the law, it's great, Leanne, that we swap these, okay? Because for me, one of the questions that came out of the last session is that there's a struggle taking place in education, right? And SACID was for decades at the center of many of those struggles. And what the SACID project is about is kind of drawing on those experiences of collective learning, of thinking, of reimagining. And of course, Neville was a critical figure in that, with many, many other people sitting around here, and understanding that we needed to bring that experience of SACID back into our critical thinking, back into the movements that we are building now, asking the kinds of questions that animated the work of SACID over many decades. And then finally, it's also been about a generational conversation. So even though John, and I'm not sure, Enver, whether John is online. I think he's not online because he's not very well and is about to undergo another operation. So our thoughts are with John as well, who's been an inspiring figure, not only in SACID, but also in this project. So it's not only been Enver and Louise and John, but it's also been younger people who've played an important role, and they're really going to, I'm handing over the baton to them. First of all, to Enver, just to say some things about SACID, and then we're handing over the baton to Kathy Lee. Am I getting that right? Tammy Lee. I've been getting it wrong for like 2 years now, isn't it? Okay. And so it's always important for people who are slightly older to embarrass themselves publicly. So it's a Tammy Lee. Tammy Lee, okay? So Tammy Lee and Lawrence will then speak to us and in fact launch the SACID website. It's an ongoing project. So this is really the first public launch. And as they will say, and Louise will say towards the end, aluta continua, but I'm going to hand over to Enver, who does not need introduction. Enver is a stalwart of the liberation movement, of education struggles. He's shaking his head, but as he's walking, yeah, I can say all of these things. He's been a key figure in many, many movements and has been an inspirational figure in this SACID archiving project. Over to you, Enver.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Noah. Thanks very much. I wish John were here, frankly, but as you heard, he's not well, so he can't be here. And in fact, when I look there are others who could easily be here. You know, I see Marcus there, Derek there, Paul Tishman. Who else is there? There must be others here. So thank you for asking me to do this, but we could easily have. No, the archiving project is really a wonderful initiative. It's going to go a long way, and the idea that of this website and so on really is really important. It's thank you very much for initiating, for doing the work. We actually talked about this, Neville, John and I, about 15 years ago. We had a much more modest objective then. We wanted to have someone do a PhD on SACID. That's what we wanted at that stage. We had no idea that, you know, and our approach would have been that we'll call a meeting of all the people who are still associated with SACID, and get the PhD student, or, you know, to talk with them and listen to what they had to say, and then somehow construct a PhD out of it. I don't know if you approve that approach, Asha, but that was one way of that's what we had, this modest idea. But as Noah said, the perennial warrior amongst us, Louise, got in touch with us and said, "What are you doing about, you know, the SACID archive?" And that's how this has come about. So thank you very much to them and for all the hard work and for getting it on. And the real purpose of it, I want to say, the real purpose of it is, as Noor said, it's not about the phrase he used, an austere edifice. For us, the purpose of this archive is quite simple. It's to mobilize, to educate, to organize, to support the development of social movements towards greater levels of consciousness, so we understand our society and the world more fully, more critically, to develop solidaristic organizations, to pursue the struggle, which we think SACED represented, some small element of all of that. And that's what we think the archive should be used for, essentially, not for creating this edifice, this static edifice. And I